right, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I see folks logging in. Welcome today. My name is Zach Schalk. I am the Indiana Program Director for Solar United Neighbors. And we are here today to have an Indiana Energy Policy Q&A with Representative Bacon and Senator Stoops. So I know everybody's on their lunch hour, so we are just going to go ahead and get things rolling. First, I did just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sure everybody is familiar with Zoom by now, but just in case, I want to make sure that folks are able to join by audio. So you can either join on the computer or join on your phone. And I also want to encourage folks to submit questions in the chat box. And also feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat so everybody can get a sense of who's on the line and where you're joining from. You can send questions either to everybody or just to panelists. I think it's more fun if you send it to everyone so folks can engage in the chat, but feel free to choose whatever you feel is appropriate. And finally, this webinar will be recorded. And we will share a link of the recording with everyone who RSVP'd after the event has ended. All right. So I wanted to start just by introducing Solar United Neighbors and IndianaDG, who's hosting this event. So as I mentioned, my name is Zach Schalk. I'm the Indiana Program Director for Solar United Neighbors. We are a national 501c3 nonprofit organization. And we are dedicated to helping Hoosiers go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And I will let Laura introduce IndianaDG.
Yeah, IndianaDG was incorporated in 2022. Besides the Vectren EDG case, we have been active participants and interveners in two renewable feed-in tariff dockets, which I've noted on the screen. So we've been a member of the Solar Energy Industries Association as well as the Indiana Chamber of Commerce.
Great, thank you, Laura. So our agenda for today, over the next hour, we're going to start with a brief introduction from me where I kind of help to frame this event and talk about how we got here, and specifically how we're going to talk today about Vectren's case to end net metering and the 21st Century Energy Policy Development Task Force and how those things are connected. Then we'll go and dive deeper into these issues with a Indiana Energy Policy Q&A featuring Representative Ron Bacon and Senator Mark Stoops, which will be moderated by Laura. And then we will end with a brief discussion about some things that you can do to help influence Indiana's energy policies. So just real quickly to frame the event, we wanted to start by talking about rooftop solar. So this slide includes a couple maps highlighting some of the key points in the growth of Indiana's rooftop solar market. And we will definitely be focusing primarily on distributed solar today, which is customer owned, and located around the energy grid. And Indiana's solar market, we have, at least as of 2019, more than 3,600 employees and directly related to the solar industry across 81 companies here in Indiana, driving hundreds of millions of dollars in direct investment into Indiana's economy. And solar installer has been ranked by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics as likely to be the fastest growing job over the next decade. So it's really important for Indiana to make sure we're able to embrace and expand on the solar market. So one of the key topics we're going to be talking about today involves net metering. So just to give a high-level overview for folks who aren't familiar with net metering basically creates a solar offset and generates kilowatt-hour credits at the full retail rate that can be used throughout the year. So this slide kind of presents what that looks like visually for an average imaginary customer, how during the day, at least when we used to go out into the world and we weren't using as much electricity at home, your solar panels will be producing more when the sun is out, and then you'd be able to benefit from the credits that you produced when you're back home at night and your energy usage starts going up. And basically, if your system is sized to cover 100% of your annual electric usage over the course of the year, your monthly production would look something like what we see on the right here, where in the summer months when the days are longer and there's more sunshine, you're producing more energy than you're using on net over the course of the month, building up credits that then you're able to use on your bill as the days get shorter and the kind of shoulder months on this graph. And we'll dive deeper into net metering later in this conversation. But in Indiana, it's a little more complicated than just the straightforward policy of net metering because of a law passed in 2017 called SEA 309, which essentially, among other things, created a timeline for phasing out net metering. And so basically what the law says is that net metering will be offered until July 1, 2022, or at least until the utility reaches 1.5% of their peak load from net metered customers, whichever is sooner. And so while a lot of folks have net metering ending in 2022 in their head, what's actually happening right now in Vectren territory is that they're seeking to end net metering for new solar customers as soon as January 1st of next year, because they have reached or exceeded that 1.5% peak load. And so basically, if you install your system before net metering ends, you will receive that full retail rate net metering until 2032, but systems installed after the deadline will not receive net metering. And under SEA 309, the post-net metering credit will be based on the marginal price, which is typically about a third of the cost of the retail rate, plus 25%. This law only applies to Indiana's investor-owned utilities, so not rural electric member co-ops or municipal electricity utilities around the state. And so as I mentioned, Vectren is seeking to end net metering for new solar customers starting as soon as January 1 of next year. There is a pending case before the IURC that will set precedent for the rest of the state. And so several groups, including IndianaDG and Solar United Neighbors, have intervened in that case. So the other part of the discussion we want to have today is about the 21st Century Energy Policy Development Task Force. So this was kind of created in the 2019 General Assembly session after a somewhat contentious back and forth that ultimately ended up in part of HEA 1278. And the task force was created to examine the state's energy policies and develop recommendations for the General Assembly and governor concerning the state's changing energy landscape. So the task force is made up of 15 members, including 8 legislators and 7 appointees from the governor, and is required to issue a report with those policy recommendations to the General Assembly and the governor no later than December 1 of this year. So the task force, as I mentioned, has 8 legislative members. It is co-chaired by Representative Ed Soliday and Senator Eric Cook. And we also happen to have one of the legislative members, Senator Mark Stoops, on the line with us today to be able to provide his perspective on the task force. You know, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about it today is that there are 4 remaining scheduled meetings of the task force between October 1st and November 19th. And again, as I mentioned, the final report is due on December 1st. And so all of these meetings, which are taking place in the House chamber, are also available via streaming through iga.in.gov. So why do we want to have this conversation now? As I mentioned, there's kind of a lot going on right now, and the timeline for all these issues kind of lines up. So as I mentioned earlier, Vectren is going to be, or is seeking a ruling from the IURC that has the potential to set precedent for the rest of the state. And under SEA 309, all the other investor-owned utilities in the state have to start a similar process to create a post-net metering tariff no later than March 1 of next year. So this is soon going to be a statewide issue of concern, not just a Vectren issue. And then finally, the task force, as we mentioned, is holding more meetings and will be issuing their recommendations in December before the General Assembly session starts in January. So there's a lot of important issues that will be impacting Indiana's solar market and distributed generation around the state more generally. And so that's what we wanted to talk about today. And so with that, I will kick it over to Laura to introduce our guests and start the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, Zach. I thought we'd start out with Representative Ron Bacon, who happens to be a solar homeowner and net metering customer of Vectren, and let him tell a little bit of his story as to how he has been involved in his suggestions on what people listening on the webinar might be doing to try to influence the decision. So Ron.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us a little bit about your solar system and what brought you to get involved in this case and specifically request a bill analysis from Vectren about this new tariff.
Okay, well, thank all of you for being here and for having me on the webinar, and I'm very happy to discuss what's going on. Back in 2015, my wife and I had built a new home in Northwest Warwick County, and we decided after we had very large electric bills and we had no other options, we looked at everything we were doing and decided that we would try to put in solar. And at that time, we worked with a local dealer here and in southwestern Indiana, and we put in a 25 kilowatt system. And then a year later, we actually upgraded it to more, and then we're now at a 27 watt, which is 96 solar panels on a existing pole barn that we have, and to have enough to offset our electric usage. Now we have a pretty good sized home, which is 39,000 square feet, and I do have a greenhouse and a pole barn, which I also heat. So I'm a little bit different than most people, so I did use quite a bit of energy. So that was the reason for getting into it. But whether you do or not, it really doesn't matter. So that's why we got involved and in that. So we've learned more and more about it since then. And being a Vectren customer, Vectren is one of the highest electric rate companies in the country, and it is the highest in Indiana. So that's another issue with us down here in southwestern Indiana.
Great, Representative Bacon. Why did you ask Vectren to do an analysis of your bill as a part of this excess distributed generation tariff filing?
Well, I think we had 5 or 6 of us that were users, yes. And we wanted to find out. My main reason to do it is to find out exactly what they're doing. They're not very receptive as telling us and being good neighbors, so to speak, with us to tell us what they're doing. So they're not good at explaining it. So by having them analyze my bill and giving me the information of what would happen if I was a new solar customer installing it, what it would be, gave me the knowledge to tell my constituents and my friends what's going on with the solar industry. And by having them do that for a year, we found out that my bill would have been 5 times higher than it is with the new system that they're proposing versus the net metering system we have in place now.
Wow, 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 wow. So what else do you think is important? I mean, I know some people who are not served by Vectren are like, well, okay, I'm not a customer of Vectren, so why do I care? Do you want to comment on that?
If you're a solar user, or if you're planning on being in the future, which we all should be looking at, and if we can, then you should be very concerned. Is it going to be worthwhile doing it? Is it financially going to be helping you? And that's why everyone should be concerned. We thought when we watched this for the past couple of years that Vectren would not be the first one to go into the tariff issue. We actually kind of thought one of the northern companies would be it, but Vectren did it a little bit quicker than that. And I really think it because CenterPoint, which is based out of Texas, which is their head of their headquarters now, purchased Vectren and got all of that done last year. I think that's what's happened. They're driving this, and they did it sooner than the other electric companies. Now, you need to be concerned because it's going to happen to you. And as I tell all of my constituents, as I have the past 10 years in the State House, if you don't pay attention to what's going on, it will happen to you, because we will do it to you, or someone will, if you're not involved in the process. So that's my concern always, is to educate my constituents and the constituents of Indiana of what's going on.
So what would you recommend that they do, especially if they are a Vectren customer right now?
Well, if they're a Vectren customer right now, they should be contacting the IURC and getting as much information to them as possible, so that they're not for this program, because it's not going to help them at all. People get on solar for a reason, for two reasons: environmental and for cost. So, but for whichever reason, it's not going to help you in either way. Vectren's very heavily working to install solar themselves, but then they want it to the customers to offset that. They actually had a rate case just recently that they submitted, and it got turned down. Some of you may not know that, but for some of the installations and some of the new solar energy that they're producing, because they're shutting down a lot of the old coal plants. And I live in coal country. My whole district is coal country, and I'm not against coal, and we need to be moving into solar and renewable energy, but we need to be doing it respectfully and as easily as possible, so it doesn't affect the ratepayers.
Well, Senator Stoops, why don't we get you in the discussion and tell us what you think the purpose of this 21st Century Energy Task Force is, and what they're up to, and how the public can participate.
Wow, good question. Well, let's have a look at what they're up to. The 21st Century Energy Task Force was created to ostensibly create a policy for implementing any changes in energy production and distribution for this century. So a big task. And the chair of the task force is Representative Soliday, who I believe is more interested in reporting how he would like to see energy policy progress in the state. So there is a conflict there. Representative Soliday was very involved in Senate Bill 309 and similar bills to do away with net metering. He was also the author of the bill that would require utilities to put a moratorium on retiring coal-fired power plants and converting to renewables. So that was quite a battle last year. In the end, that bill was neutered to an extent, but still, even when you look at electric prices moving forward, that moratorium, that small moratorium that was put in place, is going to cause a raise in energy rates. Not a long-term one, but at least a short-term one. So it really had no benefit. My concern is that this energy task force is just going to be used to justify coming up with a policy to continue keeping those coal-fired power plants in operation, and really not well focused on renewable energy.
So what do you think people should do with respect to this energy policy task force, and how to participate?
Well, participation is always difficult, especially with the pandemic. The chair has decided that we're not going to take public testimony. So we've heard a series of presenters from different industries, whether it's coal, nuclear, and some industrial users. And so I think the testimony is a little lopsided. And the proposal right now is that, again, we have 4 meetings left before the report is due. We're going to have a comment where committee members can make comments ask questions and voice what they'd like to see in the report. And that would be November 12th. And then the original proposal that was detailed the other day in the committee hearing was that on November 17th, Representative Soliday and Senator Cook, the chair and co-chair of the task force, are going to present a report to the task force, and then in some way have the task force read it at that point, that morning, and then go into recess for 2 hours at noon so that we can make any changes to it. And then the report would be done and then presumably submitted as a recommendation from the task force to the General Assembly. So I don't know if typically when this happens, when you have a government body that's issuing a report and voting on it the same day, it means they don't really want comment. There's not enough time to change it. There's not enough time for anybody to analyze it and make recommendations. So that I've pushed for an earlier date for the report to be presented to committee members so that we can actually have a more reasonable amount of say in what goes in the report.
Well, Senator Stoops, do you think it would be helpful if a minority report were drafted that perhaps better reflected your feelings about these issues and those of Representative Matt Pierce, for example?
Exactly. We should have a minority report prepared. Interestingly, one of the outcomes of last session was we actually tasked Purdue, IU, and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories to produce a report to present to the 21st Energy Task Force and analyze the future models, projections, technical details, and come up with what we can expect in the future. In my opinion, what a minority report would do would be to take that 300 plus pages and use that, which is very detailed, very well done, to drive an energy policy that better promotes the best outcomes that are proposed in the report.
Well, specifically, Senator Stoops, doesn't Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories address an issue near and dear, at least to my heart, and that is distributed energy resources? And the co-chair of the committee, Representative Ed Soliday, does not seem to want to address that in this year's task force. What do we do about that? And what did he say at the last meeting about that?
Well, that's pretty amazing. It's you've got these three well-respected institutions creating this report. A lot of time, a lot of effort.
And money from the state, right?
I'm sorry?
And money.
And money, and then completely discounted it. You know, I think the most he said about it was, well, you know, we could take that hundreds of pages and look at it, but you know, that's really not what we're dealing with now. So it was very kind of an offhand comment, but basically completely discounted the report. Now, a couple of very interesting things about that report, and this is across the board. They said the best possible scenario moving forward does not include coal, does not include nuclear. It's a combination of gas-fired plants and much of our, probably 30% or more of our energy production is going to be solar and wind. And the reports all agreed. If there is, for instance, a tax on carbon dioxide, then that could easily increase up to 40% of our energy coming from solar and wind. So that's huge. That's actually very significant. And what it should tell us when we're formulating policy is that, and again, this is the best outcome because solar and wind are far less, they require far less maintenance and ongoing cost compared to all the other systems. For instance, both coal and nuclear have expensive waste remediation issues that again, the 21st Century Energy Task Force is almost refusing to look at. But if we know that in a best possible scenario and something that would also create the lowest cost of energy moving forward includes a large percentage of solar and wind, then we should be increasing our incentives to get those systems in place, not creating disincentives.
Well, there's a question here in the chat box from Jean Webb, who's a Vectren customer, and she wants to know, are the task members compensated in any way? And then what was the taxpayer bill for this report that the task force seems not interested in addressing from Lawrence Berkeley?
You know, I don't know what the cost of that report was. It's especially when you're talking about Purdue and IU, that's state money there, and I don't know what, or if anything, they paid to Lawrence Berkeley. Then task force members are compensated by a per diem, but that's it. You know, basically you get money for attending the meeting. I don't think anybody, including the chairs, is reimbursed in any other way. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about this task force, Representative Bacon, in terms of what people should be doing and what's going on?
Well, you know, as far as the task force is concerned, you need to be contacting the members of them if you're concerned, especially in your area and your representative that's on the task force. I had a bill 2 years ago to involve the local municipal units of government so that they would be not obligated to the net metering, and was not allowed to even present the bill because of waiting for the task force to make their judgment and so forth. So the only way we have of affecting that is to contact them. So my recommendation is to, you know, to contact your state representative or state senator, especially if they're on the task force in that committee, and let them hear what you say. They're always interested in their constituents. They're interested in everybody in Indiana, just like I am, but I'll listen mostly and first to my constituent who's going to be affected. So I'm in Vectren, and so if you're in Vectren territory, there's no one on the committee that's on that, but the others are listening and they're paying attention, the other utilities, because they know what's going on and they're going to be doing it soon. So you need to contact them as soon as possible.
Well, now, one correction here, Representative Ryan Hatfield, who's a Democrat in Evansville, don't forget.
I forgot, I apologize.
He is a member of the task force. And I would say that if a member of the task force is not your state legislator, what you could do is send a letter to your legislator and ask them to convey their sentiments to the members of the task force. To the members
of the committee, I apologize for that. And if Representative Hatfield's on the call, so I sorry about that. I didn't mean to ditch him. So he's a good friend of mine. So.
Yeah. So do we have any other questions that I've missed so far? It's kind of hard to.
I just want to echo what Representative Bacon has said. Constituents really, it's very important for constituents to contact committee members. And that's whether it's a bill that you know is coming up before a session, figure out who those committee members are. It's also very important for members, legislative members of the task force, because we're not professionals in this area by and large, and really all the information we can get is very helpful to us.
So there's a question from Mike Mullet to the panelists, or specifically to Senator Stoops. What about the co-chair, Senator Cook? It sounded to me at the first meeting that he assured Representative Pierce, Professor Powell, and you that the task force report and its topics of concern to you and others would be addressed by the task force in its meetings and deliberations. Do have any more insight into Senator Cook?
I'm hopeful that's the case. I'm an optimist, and I guess I would say that my concern is that the report is already written. Even though we haven't finished the series of meetings, and we need to be ready both on November 12th and before the report is released to make sure that it's an inclusive report.
Yes.
If Senator Cook is helpful in that area, I will be very happy. We need one of the chairs focused on bringing forward or including these other perspectives.
There's a question to the panelists about what state policies or utility programs are you looking into regarding transitioning coal industry workers. I will point out to the people on this webinar that Representative Ron Bacon is not seeking re-election to the General Assembly. He is running for a local county council position, and Senator Stoops is not seeking re-election. So someone else will be taking his place after the November election. So, but another question to you, Representative Bacon, do you feel like many Republican lawmakers share your views on compensation for solar customers? And have attitudes changed since the net metering law was passed? What's your sense?
My sense is still that the legislators are still confused about what's going on. Most of them were convinced at the time of the Senate and Road Act 309 that if they didn't do that, the compensation would be to the solar customers, and then their other constituents would lose, and it was going to increase their bills. And there was a lot of misinformation going on at that time. I'm not going to say there was a lot of lying, but in my opinion, that was, but there was a lot of misinformation going on, and there still is. They haven't looked into it. They haven't fully told what goes on, such as, I'm going to use a simple thing, as when they say, when my system is generating more than I need, it goes back to Vectren and they have to resend it. No, it doesn't. It goes up the street to the next guy who needs it. It's simple math, and I don't produce and go back to the generating station and it goes back. So there's a lot of misconception and misinformation that's out there. Whether they're doing better now, I really don't know. No one has mentioned it too much to me. It hasn't been on the radar until this started this past year, and then we were out of session already. So I haven't had a chance to talk to many of my colleagues about that. And to answer the question, the comment that you made that I'm not running again for re-election, that's true, but I am definitely going to stay involved and have conversations with my colleagues as a former representative to make sure that I can become their constituent then and do as much as I possibly can to make them understand.
What do you feel the importance of talking to local elected officials like mayors and
I think that's
commissioners and sheriff's departments and so on?
That's extremely important because I'll use another example down here. Boonville, which is in my district and in my county, has already put in a solar array under 309 for their sewer plant to offset the bills for their customers for the sewage plant, and they're in the process of putting another one in for the existing water plant. So the municipalities and the units of government are trying to use solar to offset their costs to their customers and provide the service that they're required to do at as cheap a rate as possible. And that was where the bill that I had in the past that Representative Soliday wouldn't hear would have taken that off the table so that they could do that. Because any unit of government that's funded by taxpayer dollars should not have to be required to pay the municipality or not the municipality, the the investor-owned utilities more tax money than we already pay for utilities and for those. So that's what you can do, is talk to them, make sure they're aware, as in Boonville, Mayor Wyatt is aware of it and very, very concerned. But if you have someone that's doing a solar project and considering it in your part of the state, you need to be talking to them.
And Senator Stoops, it's my understanding the city of Bloomington has already done a lot to install solar on their buildings and facilities.
Oh, yes. And I was, when I was county commissioner, I worked to get solar panels installed on the county buildings as well. And I think the value of that right now is, I think it's important not to overlook the amount of savings that we got based on that. So from one interesting part of this report that was prepared for the task force shows that between 2000 and basically 2026, the rates you pay for electricity have almost doubled. So when we installed those solar panels back in the early 2000s, we were saving half as much. That amount is double. And I think when we look forward over to the term that this task force is working to propose kind of future possibilities, we have to understand that electricity is going to continue, the price of electricity is going to continue to rise. And there's no telling what it's going to be in 2040, but it's still going to significantly increase. And I just did one, Representative Bacon brought up some good points related to that. For instance, I was the ranking minority member on utilities when Senate Bill 309 was working its way through. And it struck me that Senator Hirschman, who is the author of the bill, even admitted on the floor that the amount that he came up with to reimburse solar owners for their electricity was completely arbitrary. It was not based on any data. It was just something he put in the bill. And he was confident enough in the bill going through. And that was, as you say, it's basically a third of the retail rate plus a small percentage, not based on any actual fact. And actually, we could not get that taken to the IURC to come up with a value. But that energy that, for instance, Representative Bacon is producing on his property goes to his neighbor, path of least resistance. So Representative Bacon is going to be compensated at this amount. Meanwhile, all the expense he went into to install that solar array, his electricity, his excess electricity is going to go to his neighbor, and Vectren will charge his neighbor full retail value for that electricity.
That doesn't seem to be fair now, does it, Senator?
Does not seem to be fair. But also, I think it points to another point that was brought up in this report, that if you're looking for, as a task force, a 21st century task force says, they're trying to establish what's the best price. They're looking for reliability, stability, resilience, and flexibility in our energy distribution network. Then a focus on these distributed energy is going to be very important. These households and solar and wind electricity producers and the electricity they provide to the grid is going to be an essential part of a reliable and resilient network.
Well, how do both of you feel about the local elected officials in your district conveying information to state legislators? Is that important? Do they listen to their local elected officials on these matters or not?
It's very important. I think legislators need to hear, and also keep in mind, legislators as elected officials are usually see these elected officials from their local units of government very often. So I think if local governments are very interested in trying to get a fair deal out of this, or they think it's going to affect them in the future, it's very important that they communicate with their legislators.
So go ahead.
Absolutely, that's something that has to be done, and it is done. In my area. My elected officials contacted me in the last 10 years often when they had an issue like that. It did not matter what the political side of it was. Like Mayor Wyatt is a Democrat and I'm a Republican, but we're good friends. And when we have issues, we talk, and because we're both serving the constituents. So it's very, very important to do that. So
what's going to happen with Senator Merritt, who's resigning the day after the election as a member of the task force, Senator Stoops, and how will you continue to serve and participate on the task force after your term expires?
No, it's very sad, but as a retiree, when the election takes place, it's not like a lot of elections that you may be familiar with, where on January 1st, the new person takes office. With the legislature, when the results of the election are in, that person is the new senator. So there will be a new senator in my seat. But I'll definitely have many recommendations in place before that time, and I'm sure we'll come up with somebody that we can work with. So there will be a replacement for my position on the task force, either coming from the Senate Democratic Caucus, and I don't know exactly who that will be, but I know it'll be somebody who's very interested in making sure the public gets a fair deal.
But it won't necessarily be the person who is elected to your seat.
Won't necessarily be that, correct. And also, I think that would be the same for Senator Cook. So that was a question. I didn't know when he was going to retire. I didn't know if it was after the election or because I think his replacement will be chosen by Republican caucus. Whether he very easily could have stayed in till up before session.
You met Senator Merritt when he.
yeah.
Oh, Merritt. Sorry. Yeah. Merritt. Sorry.
So we've got lots and lots of additional questions. I'll try. One general question that we've got here. It says, "What can we do to restore net metering before it phases out in 2022 and get a fair incentive for solar?" What are your feelings?
Who are you addressing?
Either one.
Right. I believe there should be a bill, and I think the case could be made to restore net metering in the next legislative session. Whether it gets a hearing or not is another story. And I think it's also very important that the legislature understands that there is this whole other report that was issued, very detailed, extensive work done by IU, Purdue, et cetera, that needs to be considered when we're also talking about the report from the 21st Century Energy Task Force. So if those policy issues aren't included, then you'll see a lot of discussion about what is the value of that report by the task force, and is it inclusive of this very detailed technical work that was done by these universities?
No, I agree, and that's what needs to be done. We need to find someone who's in the legislature who's definitely interested in solar and continue it, and to bring back net metering the way it was, if possible. It's going to be very difficult if Representative Soliday is still chair, because we will have a new Speaker of the House either way that's going on. But then if he's reelected, or if he's reappointed as chair, then it's going to be real difficult to get a bill heard and much less get it passed.
And sometimes it really takes, before the public gets completely up in arms, it takes something like a deadline approaching to make them realize that, hey, there's a missed opportunity here, and really this isn't in our interest. And then when they contact their legislators, then that could have a strong positive effect on getting a bill passed.
There's a question here about schools and going solar. My understanding is schools and other local units of government have been using other tools that are available to them, such as the guaranteed energy savings contracts, which is what the city of Bloomington did. But this change in net metering will also impact even that financing mechanism. So someone is asking about what are the roadblocks to community solar? In other words, for a solar array to be constructed and to allow a number of customers to participate in the benefits from that, especially for people who are renters or their property is not conducive to an individual solar system.
Microgrids are going to be very important if we're going to increase the amount of solar that's available on the grid. And so if you've got I think one of the problems is that investor-owned utility going to allow a microgrid to connect to their system? And I think that's the hurdle right there. And are we, when we're setting policy for the next 20, 30, 40 years, are we going to put all of our eggs in investor-owned the utility basket? Or are we going to start understanding that these microgrids with, you have to think that in the not too distant future, every surface in your house or commercial building is going to be able to collect some type of solar energy, whether it's your shingles or your siding or your windows or your driveway. You'll be able to pull that solar energy in. There'll be, batteries, or there'll be the ability to store it. And it does make sense for efficiency purposes if you're able to store in a kind of microgrid network. But if a investor-owned utility doesn't want to allow you to connect to their system, then there's a disadvantage there. But at the same time, I think what we need to understand is we want to encourage these solar and other renewable energy producers to be connected to our grid. We don't want them to be on their own, because it's a real benefit to everybody to be able to have that extra power distributed back on the grid. And I think what we're doing now is creating a disincentive for that. Why wouldn't I have my own solar array, a backup generator, and batteries, and just say, well, forget, in my case, Duke, forget you. I'm set. And I think that would be a mistake.
Indiana University apparently did something called the Hoosier Living Survey, and the results showed that 50% of the respondents, no matter where they lived, urban, rural, or somewhere in between, would like to have solar on their homes or their businesses. Do you think the legislators are familiar with the results of that survey? And would that help if we help to get that information out to them?
I think it definitely would help make sure that they do know about it, and then have it through their constituents to make sure that they're aware of it. So anything like that coming directly locally, especially from the constituents in their district, is going to be very informative, and it's going to have an impact.
Yeah, someone else is asking about, the last several sessions of the General Assembly, there has been legislation on the problem of homeowner associations and solar rights. The bills have not passed yet, they've gotten close, but would you like to comment about how to approach that particular issue? It seems like there's a particular segment of the business community that is not interested in allowing people in HOAs to do solar.
Well, I'm not, I know it happened. Not real familiar with it, because we don't, in my area, we don't have a lot of homeowner associations. They do in the Evansville area next to us, and I know that, and I've heard that there's lots of groups that don't want the arrays on the homes and don't want to do that. So I'm not real sure how that's going to be addressed and how it can be. I think that's the wrong approach. I think the solar panels, I can understand on putting a wind turbine in the middle of the subdivision. You've got to think about that, and that. But the solar arrays on the rooftops should not be an issue at all in any homeowner association group, if the homeowner is going to pay for it, and that. So I don't see why that should be an issue.
And I think it's just the fact that traditional solar panels are big panels, black panels, and they just don't like the look of them. But the fact is, it shows you who has some lobbying power in the legislature. The fact
True.
that these are getting killed at the last minute. But I think with these agreements with the homeowners associations, what they may do is actually when it gets to the point, well, it's now you can install shingles on your home that look just like any shingle. Are you then not going to be allowed to install those and have power generated by solar? If it's not the black panels. So I think it'll pass at some point. I think every year the bill gets introduced, it gets farther along. More objections are answered. My hope that would be that sometime in the next session or two, the legislature would allow that bill to pass through.
Thank you. I know we've got a question here from the folks in Batesville and Oldenburg who are serviced by Duke Energy. They have some questions about how to get through to Duke Energy. They said that they have a renewable energy commission and they've not been successful in getting them to respond recently to their inquiries. I guess my suggestion would be is go to the top. If you can't get the person who's the middle management person, I'd go straight to the president of Duke Energy Indiana, which is Stan Penniger, and be relentless.
I would suggest going to your state legislator, whether you're representative or senator. We have connections to, for instance, Duke, that we can request an answer, or we can request information or help for a constituent if they're not able to do it on their own. So go to your local legislator and tell them your story, tell them what's going on and the difficulties you've had, and they might be able to set up that contact and get information for you.
I agree.
Zach, did you have any final questions? I know someone was asking for you to comment on the expiration of the federal tax incentives.
Sure. Well, not much of a question there. I guess that's just pointing out that in addition to net metering coming to an end, there is some urgency around helping folks go solar as soon as possible, because the federal investment tax credit, which has already stepped down from 30% to 26%, is scheduled to go to 22% next year before phasing out entirely for residential customers in 2022. So you have a new friend there, Laura.
Yes.
I think we did get one last question, which this goes into the weeds a little bit, asking us, so I don't know if either of you are familiar with FERC Order 2222, which will soon provide the opportunity for microgrids to aggregate solar generators and supply their excess energy directly to the regional MISO or PJM, the regional power markets, at competitive prices. And so the question is, do you think that the General Assembly will be interested in facilitating this process when it starts next summer?
I'm not familiar with it at all. So as you said, it's getting into the weeds, but I think they might be, if you want to put in and have the legal right to put in the panels. Let's say I wanted to put in another 100 panels and do that. I don't think any reason why the General Assembly would be against allowing me to do it if I can put it on the grid otherwise. Now, of course, you still got to deal with Vectren and how are we going to get it to that and so forth. But and that's something we also need to be thinking about as we go into the future. The grid is not just Indiana, and it's not just southwestern Indiana or Bloomington or wherever. It's the whole United States. So having the ability to generate excess energy when we need it is going to be very, very important in the future, because we've got a big problem working on IndiGrid on the federal government area also. So we need to have that in mind when we do this.
Well, thank you for that. I've been trying to go through the chat feature to see if there are any other burning questions that I have missed.
But I think I'll just express I tend to be an optimist, but I'm also kind of a realist and sometimes a little cynical when it comes to the state legislature. My concern about things like the microgrids being able to maybe bypass the investor-owned utility is that you very well could see some bill moving forward to make that not happen in the state of Indiana. And if I'm hearing the question correctly, set up a microgrid that would be separate and then handle the purchase and sale of that energy would be handled by MISO. But the other concern I have is, and this is something that I realized with Senate Bill 309, is that if it gets to the point where you're a homeowner and you have solar panels and you are off the grid, that I could very well see these investor-owned utilities coming up with a rationale to charge that person who is off the grid some type of fee for just being present within a certain district.
Yeah.
And they would say that, well, we're keep in mind these investor-owned utilities, they're guaranteed a profit. They're also guaranteed that they can recoup any expense for anything they do, including in their grid. But I also believe that they would try to implement some type of fee for off the grid renewable energy owners. And that's something I think you'll need to keep an eye out. And I don't think it would be it'd probably be sometime within 3-4 years that you'll start seeing that come through, at the federal level and through like American Legislative Exchange Council and then down to the states.
So Representative Bacon, do you have any final remarks? There is a comment here on the chat thanking you for pledging to remain involved in this issue.
Well, I do. Like I said, I have the solar panel, so I'm going to still be involved and watch what's going on. And the best thing I can say is all of the people watching and those involved, and tell all your friends, if you're concerned, get involved and talk to your legislator and your representative in your Senate, and go on up to the governor's office, even at that point, especially if you're not getting any of your issues heard by your state representative or your senator. You can go a little bit farther than that too. So always stay involved so you can do as much as you possibly can. Don't just sit back and wait for something to happen.
And if anyone on the webinar today has questions, Zach, what further questions they think of once we sign off, we will be happy, I assume, to forward those questions to our guests and get a response back.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's actually a great place to come to a close. So I'm going to share my screen again and try to end on a note that we've touched on a little bit today about what you can do. I will say, as Laura mentioned, if you have any additional questions, please feel free you can send them to us. You can go ahead and use inteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. Send us questions and we can try to get you an answer. But what you can do, so we've talked a lot today about contacting your legislator and other elected officials. So Solar United Neighbors right now has a easy way for you to do that. If you go to solarunitedneighbors.org/INSolarFuture, you'll be taken to a form with some background information that allows you to easily contact your elected representative and senator and to tailor your message so that you can share your story and personalize it to a way that means the most to you. And we also think another great thing you can do is write letters to the editor and try to help raise awareness about these issues in your community. And actually, if you do send a letter to your state representatives, your confirmation email that you'll get will include some examples that you can customize and submit to your local newspaper or other media outlet. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. Again, inteam@solarunitedneighbors.org, and we're happy to help. And finally, tell your friends. We need more people involved here. need to build a solar movement so that we can push back against the organized interests that are holding our policies down. So please get involved yourself, get your friends involved, and hopefully we can make a difference. So on that, I do just want to give one final thank you to Laura, Representative Bacon, and Senator Stoops. This was a fascinating conversation. I hope everybody learned a little bit. I know that I did. And hopefully we've motivated you to take further action to fight for solar here in Indiana. So thank you all so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.